So, traditional Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, to understand
Atheist and agnostic as well as many types.
I've been told I'm not real, so clearly this episode's
Who told you you're not real?
people on the internet. There was a meme that went out said that atheists don't believe in God, so we shouldn't believe in them. Right? So this episode's not even real.
Okay, there is a linguistic point of view where I can see that what they say could make sense, even though it's a faulty perspective. If believing in is trusting. If you don't trust God, why should I trust you kind of thing? Though that's not actually socially constructive.
Right? So if you haven't picked up on it yet, we're talking about atheism today. Yay me.
Hi, I'm Preston.
And I'm Katie.
Welcome to the Holy Watermelon Podcast.
I finally get some representation up in here.
Right.
So we're talking about atheism and agnosticism, and we've thrown in some other buzzwords, terms, concepts that are often linked with those two.
Help fill out this
episode. I said before we press record, and I'll say it again now that record has been pressed, is I don't know if I'm excited because representation or concerned that this is going to be a really boring episode, because I think I can sum it up in my very first sentence of notes.
Go for it.
Atheists don't believe in a higher power. No, not even Satan. And no, we don't hate God either. Finn.
Atheism is a slightly stronger position than that, though. It's the ism of there is no God.
Yeah.
Like it's a declaration. To say I'm an atheist is to deny God. Not just I don't think so, I don't believe that there is. It's there isn't.
No, I know. But so often the misconceptions, let's just tackle them right now. The misconception is that either we worship Satan.
What doesn't make any sense.
We don't believe in Satan, just like God. We do not believe in Satan. If God doesn't exist, Satan doesn't exist. Or the other is that we hate God. And see former point.
It's the fan club that's hated.
We don't hate God. We don't believe God exists. So, yeah, now that is clear. That's atheism. Bye.
But there's so much more to it. There's a lot of things that fit into this discussion of non-belief. It's a heavy bag.
It is. Where do we want to start?
That's a great question.
I do like the Stephen Roberts quote because I think it makes atheism somehow more relatable.
Sure.
So let's start there. So Stephen F. Roberts said, I contend that we are both atheists. I just believe in one fewer God than you do. When you understand why you dismiss all the other possible gods, you will understand why I dismiss yours. And lots of other famous atheists speak to that point. We collectively believe in about 3,000 different gods. So if you follow the Abrahamic religion, you don't believe in 2,999, and I don't believe in 3,000. And that's the difference. So we're both very similar in that regard.
Right. As somebody who believes in a lot less than 3,000 gods, it makes this a pretty easy common ground to find.
I like it. Like, that's it. What else do you want to say?
What other famous atheists do you have in your sleeve?
I mean, my favorite famous atheist is Richard Dawkins. He wrote a fantastic book called The God Delusion, which I highly recommend if you were... I'm sure he's written other books too, but The God Delusion is sort of his, pinnacle. As well as doing a ton of speaking. And I forget what exactly he did for a living. He was like a professor of biology, of science. And so he always spoke to evolution. And then that just turned into him becoming a speaker on, I think probably originally against creationism and then into atheism. So that's how he got
The natural course of frustration
natural course of frustration.
Right.
I love that. Yeah, so I highly recommend The God Delusion if you are an atheist and have trouble articulating it, if you're thinking about atheism, or if you have someone in your life that's atheist and you think they're slaughtering goats every weekend. Probably just...
That's a thing for people who believe in gods.
Right? We won't do that. We're actually really boring people.
You've got a few more of your favorite atheists listed here. What else you got?
Oh, Christopher Hitchens is another one. I haven't read a ton of Christopher Hitchens, but he and Richard Dawkins would speak all the time. I'm less of a fan of Sam Harris, but he's also the only one left alive.
The only other atheist left alive.
One who speaks to it free, and he's written books on it. He wrote A Letter to a Christian Nation. He got in a big fight with Ben Affleck on Islam.
Oh, yeah.
Quite famously. Apparently he's turned into quite the far-right extremist, though. So, yeah.
Wait, a far-right extremist that isn't a Christian?
I know, that's what I said to Brian. Because Brian said, he's like gone off the deep end. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And I was like, but he's an atheist. And we'll get into this. Not that there aren't militant or extreme atheists, but anyway. Other famous ones, it's not really their realm, but Ricky Gervais is a very, he's quite open about being an atheist. And is it Penn, the tall one of the magicians of Penn and Teller?
Penn and Teller, yeah.
The one that actually
Penn Jillette's the tall one.
Yeah, Penn Jillette talks a lot as well about atheism. So they're great to, search on YouTube and watch some of their debates and arguments. So I think those are the ones off the top of my head that I gravitate towards.
Yeah. It's a pretty good crew.
Unless you think we're all devil worshippers.
See, it just doesn't make sense.
I know. That's an entirely different topic.
Yeah.
Richard Dawkins has used the example of atheism, which is kind of a parody religion, but it's basically like not believing in Thor, right? To explain the concept of atheism. So, do you believe Thor is real? Most people don't. I'm sure there are some Neo-Norse.
Well, and you got a handful of people that are willing to accept that Thor may have been a historically real person, like the historic Jesus.
Absolutely, but to be up there in the clouds...
That's an entirely different matter.
So he uses atheism to basically describe atheism. Oh, you don't believe Thor's in the clouds with his hammer? Oh, okay. Cool. Neither do we. He's also, we talked last episode about Russell's teapot. He uses the Russell's teapot example a lot as you can't disprove that there isn't a teapot floating around space. So... ergo, there must be a teapot. Yeah, those are some famous atheists.
There's a handful of atheist organizations that have popped up over the years as well for probably not all the same reason. I think there's probably some diversity in the reason there. You've got groups that feel like there's oppression against atheists. If you're familiar with American politics at all, you will definitely have heard that it's not okay to have a non-Christian in the White House.
Oh my goodness. Can I pop in with this stat? I was going to save it, but you've...
Go for it.
Set it up so nicely. So in a God Delusion, and I wasn't going to dig through the book to find it, but it is in the God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. There was a study done, and they polled people on who... or like how much they would trust someone in a political position if they were basically anything other than a white man, heterosexual man. So they like, how much would you trust someone if they were a black man? And so a little less than a white man. How much would you trust them if they were a Muslim? Okay, well, a little less than that. And then how much would you trust them if they are a white woman? Well, a little less than that. And it would go and go and go. And
Ouch.
The lowest trust was atheist. So they would trust, and I mean, none of these are problems, but when you think of who
They're
historically...
all problems.
No, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being gay.
Right.
But when you think of how intolerant people can be, the fact that you can be a gay Muslim woman and you're trusted more in power than someone who just doesn't believe in God. Yeah. It was like mind-blowing that I didn't realize that it was still such an issue. And again, not that there's anything wrong with being a gay Muslim woman, but, you know, we see prevalent Islamophobia and homophobia and sexism constantly. So you think people would, you know, statistically have a problem with those more than an atheist, when I think, I don't know what stats are for number of atheists in the world, but I think it's quite predominant. That's crazy to me that people just like lose trust because someone doesn't believe in a deity.
Oh, yeah. Employers are forbidden from asking you your religion, but there's an awful lot of people who just know in their community it's a lot better if you put it on your resume, because then you'll get the job over somebody who doesn't.
Yeah.
And so some of these atheist collective groups that are organized are actively fighting this discrimination.
Yeah, I think it was the God Delusion as well. Talked about, or maybe it was just an interview with Richard Dawkins, but they're talking about how he's like 95% sure that Barack Obama is an atheist, but he had to put on the Christian front to get elected. And like, I mean, the way Donald Trump behaved, I don't actually... If he's a Christian, he's a terrible Christian.
If he was genuinely a Christian, remember when he actually had the military and armed forces come and tear gas punch people so he could take a picture in front of a church?
Yeah.
A church in which he had never set foot, according to the priest that worked there. If he was a Christian, I think he would have taken a picture in front of the church he attends.
Right? Yeah, so, and I think that's a problem to pretend to be religious for political gain.
Right.
Which I actually have a great example of that, but I'll loop back to that. I mean, honestly, it's the atheists who are like trying to take God out of school, for sure. And
yeah, people like to blame that on the influx of foreigners in the country. No, it's the atheists.
My mom did that once. And I literally called her out. She was like, it's these people coming to our country. And I was like, Mom, they all believe in God. It's the atheists. It's me. It's the atheists trying to take it out. Yeah, so there was... I never actually watched it. There was a documentary on Netflix about a lady who was like at the forefront of taking the Lord's Prayer to schools. And, like, just the death threats that she gets, and
people issue death threats over the dumbest things.
But if there isn't God in schools, Preston, then we'll be slaughtering lambs. I don't know what people... If you have a problem with atheists, can you please email me and tell me what you think we do with our free time? I'm just really curious. No, truly, I'm like, I eat potato chips and...
If you're worried about your children not receiving a religious education in school, remember that as a parent, it's your job to teach your children anything that they're not learning somewhere else.
That's a great parenting tip, actually. Wow. Yeah, so atheists kind of sort of organized, like Preston said. There are groups with a goal, generally making things more secular and removing religion from them, so they're more accessible to, I'd argue, all religions.
Yeah.
Right? When you take the Christian Lord's Prayer out of school, it's more accessible to people of other religions and atheists and agnostics.
Yeah.
And then there's your online atheists and keyboard warriors. I'm not going to pretend like there aren't extreme atheists, and I know people have a problem with them, but there's extreme Christians and extreme Muslims and extreme feminists and whatever.
I don't know if there's an idea out there that somebody hasn't taken to the extreme. Like, there are people fighting over which is the best My Little Pony character. Everything somebody's taken to the extreme.
But I would say my note is that I, Katie, so this is what the note says, think that the majority of atheists just kind of chill on their own with no formal organization. We just exist. Like I said, we're kind of boring.
I don't think you're boring.
Thank you.
There's a reason that we're able to do this show together.
You're the best. how about you tell me why you believers are so antagonistic towards us? Just throwing you under the bus there, but it's also in our notes.
It's for some Christians, they feel that they are under attack from atheists. I think an awful lot of Christians realize that they're not personally being attacked, but an awful lot do. And Richard Dawkins is kind of one of the more aggressive voices out there too. And being a public figure, it's easy to recognize. And it's weird that atheists, especially the non-aggressive ones, who are the majority typically, just have a simple request: evidence.
Yes, like we talked about in parody religions, the burden of proof is on the believer.
Right. And the lack of compelling evidence makes it hard to adopt a new belief. And the vast majority of Christians have gone into this conversation without providing any compelling evidence to their audience, which is super frustrating. And it's more frustrating when the average believer has found enough evidence to satisfy their own demands for evidence, and yet those little pieces of evidence aren't enough for the people they're talking to. That can be very frustrating until you recognize the nature of your evidence and realize that it's not really usually something that's easy to share in a way that is going to compel anybody else. As we talked about, the deal of witnesses and perspective, perception being reality in our previous episodes. You can't force somebody else to believe when your evidence is not meeting the standards of your audience.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we spent a whole episode on this, and then how people process information.
Right.
Right. So even if you have evidence that would stack up, and I mean, we see this now with fake news and not fake news, that people are either believing things that aren't real or not believing things that are real. So even if evidence does stack up, you still can't force someone to believe because of their own biases and how they process information.
Exactly.
So,
if new information is at odds with something that you refuse to let go of, then you're definitely not going to accept this new information.
Right.
And that's more commonly a problem among believers than non-believers. I really like, Nietzsche is a famous atheist.
he's like the OG atheist, but not really. They credit like atheist philosophy to him.
He's a pretty great voice in the early discussions of, hey, no, there is no God. And one of his great quotes that so many people love to just quote the first three words of a much longer, fully excellent quote.
God is dead. God is dead.
And people like to stop there. The rest of the quote is solid gold.
Okay.
And I'm going to read it
the whole
for
thing
you.
now that the atheist in me is wow. Say dead. No, I'm kidding.
God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned and has bled to death under our knives? Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? This guy was a great writer.
Yeah, right? That's, wow. One ring to rule them all.
Right? And so he used this phrase to express his idea that the Enlightenment had eliminated the possibility of the existence of God. How he got there is rather complicated, and I don't feel like the Enlightenment does eliminate the possibility of the existence of God, but obviously people disagree with me, and that's okay.
I was going to say, you wouldn't. That's why we're here.
But what's really interesting is that in this position that he holds, the burden then falls on atheists to deal with the mystery of teaching morality in a vast wasteland of subjectivity and relativity. It's a spectrum now, and we have to figure out how we can proceed in this world. Things were a little simpler when we had a God to say what's right and what's wrong.
I mean...
that the whole of society agreed upon, and now that's not our reality.
Even without atheism, though, that's our reality with the hundreds of thousands of denominations of Christianity.
Right.
Right? I mean, within Christianity, some denominations say it's fine to be gay. Some say it's not fine to be gay. Some say sex before marriage is fine. Some say sex before marriage is the worst thing you could possibly do. And those are all moral questions.
Yeah.
So I think this kind of comes back to one of our very early episodes on where morality comes from and what is, I think it was our What is Religion episode. And, I don't think our morals come from modern religions.
And I somewhat disagree. See, well, morality isn't one monolithic thing. Morality itself is a spectrum.
That's true.
What even the average Christian would be considered quite immoral to somebody who holds, themselves to the old Mosaic law where eating shrimp is a thing you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
So it's a spectrum, and there's differing standards in differing groups.
Right, but then, ergo, it can't come from religion alone. Maybe that's what I'll concede.
It comes from people.
Yeah. And feelings.
For sure. Because people have feelings.
Yes. We are emotional beings.
Kind of an awful lot.
Anything else you want to ask me as our resident atheist? Like I said, we're pretty boring, I think. We just don't believe.
I mean, it's that simple. It's how much further can you dive into a shallow pool?
Wow. What are you saying about me?
No. There's more to you than atheism.
Okay, good.
But atheism itself is a shallow pool.
Yeah, so if you're ever thinking we're Satan worshippers, just remember all the theisms. Monotheism, one. Polytheism, many. Pan, everything. None.
Nothing at all.
Nothing at all. Satanism is what you're looking for.
We'll talk about that another day.
Yes.
So adjacent to atheism, we have agnosticism. So where atheism literally means no God-ism, agnosticism is don't know ism. Literally.
I wrote that this is kind of a cop-out, but
it's a genuine position that a lot of people
No, I know, and I've
hold.
had my agnostic moments too.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, agnostic is the idea that we can't know if there's a God or not. Fair. And Preston made the note. Did I make the note? How can we know if anything is real or not?
Right?
It's more that if there is a God, we can't comprehend it. And I've made claims to that. I generally think there isn't. But if there is, it's something so beyond...
It's more complex than the way people present it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's not anything that we have.
The vast majority of theists tend to agree with you as well. Especially in the Catholic dogma. It's God is unknowable. We have little snippets here and there, but you're straight up not even supposed to try for most people. Which is also a position that I don't love.
No, because then what's the point?
Right?
Right, and that's kind of where I tend towards atheism, because if it's so profound we can't comprehend it, then it goes back to why are we following these rules?
Right.
Because we could be 100% wrong on these rules if we can't comprehend a higher power. So anyway, I digress in that, but
yeah, basically the idea is typically for most agnostics, the human brain can't comprehend God, and that we don't know what's going on. Usually agnostics are people who are willing to believe generally in some greater creative force, but are hesitant to believe in specific truth claims. Especially the more specific you get, the more questionable they can be. And thanks to what we've learned in science, you can make some pretty specific claims that can outright be disproven.
Now, are these the people who say they're spiritual but not religious?
I think some people who say that they're spiritual but not religious definitely fall into this category. It's the easiest cop-out.
I mean, I think this kind of comes, I've said it before. Sorry, everyone. I've said it before, I don't think you should be moderate in your beliefs. So if you're going, well, we can't know either way, like, have you actually thought about it? And I'm not saying you still won't come to the conclusion of agnosticism, but that's always my first question is, have you actually sat down and really rumbled with the possibility one way or the other?
Well, and there's the struggle of, you can, through your own meditation, come to accept the idea that, yeah, there's a God, and still be bombarded with all of these different voices saying, this is God, or this is God, or that's God, and not be able to determine where to go from there.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, most people avoid that.
Yeah.
Most people don't know anything about a religion other than their own.
It's true.
Because there's a lot, and I would be curious what the average, just the average believer, not saying anyone in particular, what their thoughts would be exploring other religions genuinely. I mean, I know you've done it, but you've always had an interest in it. But like just some random Joe off the street handing him a book on Sikhism and see what that does for an awakening, an enlightenment. Right? Because this goes back to atheism. If you can read up on Sikhism and go, this is weird, why would anyone believe this? Now, I think that's something to reflect on. Okay, well, is what I think weird?
Right. A lot of people have much more difficulty examining their own beliefs than others.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I believe it because it's true, which is, of course, an argument that gets nobody anywhere at all.
Yep. Show me the teapot.
Right? Take a lot of looking because we don't know where it is. It's somewhere.
It's out there, though.
Between Earth and Mars, I think is where Russell said it was.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's orbiting, though, so.
Yeah, it's orbiting the sun somewhere between Earth and Mars.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's an awful lot of space.
We'll find it one day. I believe. So that's basically it for atheism and agnosticism. So it's like, I feel like this is going to be a boring episode.
But I feel like we're making it not boring, and we're definitely informative.
For sure. And now that everyone knows I don't slaughter goats in my free time, they can breathe a sigh of relief. I wanted to throw two other terms in particular. So we're going to chat about secularism and humanism. And I'm mentioning both now because often people who are essentially atheists identify themselves as secular humanists. And so we're going to dive into those terms. And I think part of that is because of all the nasty connotations that come with atheism is to rename yourself something a little nicer.
Make it sound like you have an ism that isn't a negative.
Right. But Preston and I were talking about this, and I think you need to just own your label, whatever it is, because then it just leaves room for the bad.
Sure.
Right? We were talking about this. I know someone who calls himself a Christ follower instead of a Christian because of all the baggage that now comes with Christianity, but I don't think that helps Christianity.
No, it doesn't.
Or same thing, we use the example of, this is, when we were snacking before the episode, of people who say they believe in equality but aren't feminists. Well, that doesn't help the cause of feminism in that it's been historically that women have been at a disadvantage. So to just be like, oh, equality, this brushes the idea that women have been historically disadvantaged under the rug. So,
but there's a good reason for both of these people, even if they're not really on board with critical thought.
Well, and I get it, because there are garbage feminists, but you can't and there's garbage atheists.
And garbage Christians.
Oh, are we going to address Hitler?
Let's do it.
Cool. So one of everyone's like favorite argument against atheism is that Hitler was an atheist, which is like actually debatable.
He was extremely superstitious and believed a lot of things.
Yes, and he was raised Catholic. And I'm just bringing... He was raised Catholic, and one of the arguments I sort of saw where it was like, it doesn't matter if he's an atheist, is that he used his Christianity to gain power. And this goes back to, was Obama actually Christian? Was Donald Trump actually Christian? If you're using religion to gain power, it doesn't matter if you're an atheist, because you're using religion to be a bad person.
Right.
In the case of Hitler. So that's just for everyone who's going to be like sending us messages that says that Hitler was an atheist.
I'm really uncomfortable with the parallels between Trump and Hitler.
Yeah, that's a different episode.
I'm so glad that he's not president. I don't have strong positive feelings for Biden, but they're not the strong negative feelings I had for Trump.
Yeah, so there's the Hitler atheist debate that we so frequently hear. Anyway, back to secularism. So secularism, we most commonly hear it as the idea of the separation of church and state. So you living in a secular country. It means removing religion from decision making is sort of more specifically what the term means. Which
is intensely difficult to do when you have an awful lot of Christians in your government.
Well, and that was one of my points, is that while the United States and even Canada says that they're secular countries, because there are so many religious people in power, there's absolutely religious influence in decision making. I'd say probably most prominently is abortion laws. If it were a secular issue, it would be legal. And then if you're religious and that's against your religion, then you just don't get an abortion.
And it should be that simple.
And same with gay marriage, right?
If you don't believe in gay marriage, don't get gay married.
Don't marry someone of the same gender. So that would be an example of removing religious decision making from.
We have an awful lot of public servants all around the world, not in any one specific country, though you're guaranteed to find some specific examples if you look around yourself, that an awful lot of public servants feel that they're not actually meant to serve the public. They're only there to serve their friends. And that's not okay.
Yes. Yes, you are correct. Yeah, I don't know how you fix that. It's just holding your people in public office accountable.
Yeah, but thanks to the fact that they write the laws.
But they always want to get hired again. Remember that.
They do, which is why they do just enough nice things right before they call an election.
Which is why we need to hold them accountable throughout their term, which, I mean, even I'm not great at, and I should be better at. But so you can be, I mean, generally, you're not religious if you're a secularist, but you can absolutely be religious and be a secularist. It's, again, the idea that you remove religion from decision making so you can advocate for public decision making. Obviously, if you're religious, you'd probably make your private decisions based off of religion, but you can advocate for secularism in public spaces.
Absolutely. One of the most important teachings of Jesus, according to Jesus himself, is the need to take care of your neighbors. Regardless of any reason why you might not want to, you have to take care of your neighbors. That's a pretty good reason to be a secularist. Recognize that you have neighbors that don't believe the same things you do, and that you still need to take care of their needs.
Yes, and I guess to expand on that people wouldn't be lacking because of their religious beliefs. So same thing, we think of it in public spheres, but, you know, because you're a different religion, you still have access to the same health care and education and opportunities that someone maybe of the mainstream faith has. It doesn't matter. Regardless of your religion, you still have the same job opportunities, whatever. You don't need to be fearing for your life.
Right.
Or livelihood because you are of a particular faith.
Yeah.
So I talk about the U.S. and Canada not being as secular as they claim. And I made a note that says, so anyone complaining about Sharia law, you better look in the mirror.
For sure. We have religious laws in pretty much every English-speaking country. I can't speak for the others, but I bet you they're there.
Yeah, I mean, I know Russia and China have had like militant atheist political programs, which are not good.
And yet they both still discriminate against homosexuals.
Right.
Which most people like to mostly blame on Christianity.
Right. And I don't know. I know the Scandinavian countries are predominantly atheists, but I don't know what their political decision making is like to comment particularly. But yeah, you're right. Any of these Western countries, for sure, Western Hemisphere countries, definitely have religious influence in their public decision making.
For sure. I think secularism as an idea is kind of interesting that it's a Western idea. It's like religion, which the word exists as a Western idea, as something that's separate from the mundane.
Yeah.
We talked about in Shintoism how the state of Japan made Buddhism the state religion, even though everybody was a Shintoist, because they didn't see Shinto as a religion. Yeah. Meaning that there was no secularism because they didn't distinguish between the two.
Yeah, because it was so ingrained.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's because we're younger countries.
Maybe.
Right? Because we had our indigenous peoples here, and then we were colonized.
And we have more diversity of belief.
That's what I mean, but I think that is because we're younger countries, and we were colonized and, basically populated through immigration. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you look at, I think like Iceland in particular, where everyone's still blonde and blue-eyed because they haven't had those levels of immigration, and it's such an ancient country, you wouldn't, or Japan too, right? Well, you wouldn't necessarily. That's why people in Iceland still believe in elves, because they haven't had the same outside influences as, again, Canada and the United States, which were built entirely on outside influences. Probably, unfortunately.
I think it's really nifty that you picked Iceland as your example, that they have changed so little that when they first were colonized, Norse and Icelandic were the same language. And the people of Norway continued to evolve, and their language continued to evolve to the point that they're not the same language, but there's some mutual intelligibility there. But the Icelandic language of today is the same as Norse was 1,500 years ago.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
A lady from Iceland was telling me that how they name themselves is that you take, like, so you take if you're a boy, you take your dad's first name as your last name. And if you're a girl, you take your mom's first name as your last name. So no one has the same last name in a family. But because she grew up in Canada, she has her dad's, it's like her grandpa's first name as her last name, because we're patriarchal in how we name. So she's since moved back to Iceland, and everyone's like, why is this your name? That doesn't make any sense, because it's son of. Her name is son of when it should be daughter of. Anyway, fun fact.
Yeah, that's weird. And that's a easy enough fix. I don't know of any courts that straight up won't allow you to change your name.
No, but she was born and raised in Canada and intends to come back to Canada. It's just a funny cultural.
It's weird that her parents didn't just stick with the former nomenclature, because you can write whatever you want on the birth certificate when you register a kid.
Well, there you go.
I don't know. Odd and interesting things. And so these secularists that we have here in the West are trying to, I want to say split, but I want you to understand that I'm not trying to say break. There needs to be a division between religious life and secular life. There needs to be a lack of specific religious doctrine in government when we have such a diverse plurality of people here.
I think part of the problem, and this is just off the top of my head, is that We also live in such an individualistic society.
We really do.
The U.S. is even worse than Canada, but
Yes.
where we put the individual ahead of the group. So it's really hard to think of, or this is maybe where secularism is kind of scary, because we want what's best for us and not what's best for everyone, when secularism absolutely is best for everyone because it encompasses nothing, and therefore everyone can take part, whereas to encompass everything it would be very difficult, and to encompass one or two is unfair.
It's so weird to me how many people are opposed to the idea of not having dogma forced down their throats. I don't get it.
I mean, it's because the people who, they would be the ones doing the forcing.
And that is the goal, that people who seek out power are the people that you don't want to have power.
Right, or the people who are like okay with dogma being forced down their throats, it's because it's their dogma. It's
And
not
they want to
something-
force it on someone
This is where
else.
we come back to my Sharia law comment. Is like, well, you know, you see it anyone go on Facebook and someone be like, well, we don't want Sharia law. And it's like, well, we have pretty, Christian law here.
Yep.
So what's wrong with Sharia law?
Right.
A, you don't understand Sharia law. And B,
Fact.
how is it so different than what we have now?
Right?
So, because it's not their version being shoved down the throats, they want their version, and so it's someone else's version instead of having no version, which is secularism. I hope that was a great explanation / analogy.
So, George Holyoake, the guy who coined the word secularism back in 1851, argued that secularism is not an argument against Christianity. It is one independent of it. It does not question the pretensions of Christianity. It advances others. Secularism does not say there is no light or guidance elsewhere, but maintains that there is light and guidance in secular truth, whose conditions and sanctions exist independently and act forever. Secular knowledge is manifestly that kind of knowledge which is founded in this life, which relates to the conduct of this life, conduces to the welfare of this life, and is capable of being tested by the experience of this life. I like that.
Do you want to unpack it a bit?
I mean, it's a lot of things, but basically it's, to simplify it, it's we worry about the things that we can see in this life to govern this life. That it's not okay to govern somebody else based on something that they don't believe in.
Yep.
And that can also get a little bit complicated if you are trying to convince somebody that murder is bad if they don't believe in bad. But I think most people can understand that there is desirable and undesirable, even if there's different standards on that.
Or a spectrum of standards.
Absolutely.
Take a shot every time we say the word spectrum.
It's a spectrum. So, of course, there's, like we said before, there's extremes in everything. You have hard secularists and soft secularists.
Oh.
Right? And so these two categories are actually more similar than they are different. Hard secularism considers religious propositions to be epistemologically illegitimate. They seek to deny them as much as possible. Whereas soft secularism is really simple, just all about tolerance and liberalism, which isn't the big L, these are the liberals.
Libtards.
It's little L liberalism of we should be free to make our choices.
There's some give and take here, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So often, secularism is paired with humanism. And like you said, people identify themselves as secular humanists, or you can just be a humanist. And I know humanist chaplains exist. So there is some organization under humanism. But again, it's not, I guess anything could be a religion, but there's no deity in humanism.
That depends on how you define deity.
Oh.
See our former episodes.
Humanism is a philosophical term that focuses on human agency and intelligence as the best way to progress. So it's a human first philosophy. Again, religion, perhaps.
Yeah, it's been, the word humanism has been used in a few different ways by a few different groups over the years, but generally, each of the different movements agree on the importance of affirming human freedom and progress.
Humanism goes...
You can do it.
No, there's just so much happening right now. Humanism actually goes as far back as the 1500s. And by 1500s, I mean 1500 BCE.
It's thousands of years old.
Thousands of years old.
Not just hundreds.
Talking about humanism. And so Confucianism is one that is kind of a humanist philosophy. It
For sure.
puts Confucius at the center of it. And then even the Rig Veda talks about humans and human agency and things like that. So it's a very old term, but it has become, I would definitely say, more popular as we try to navigate this atheistic spectrum.
And of course, because of these ideas, the burden of human improvement falls on us individually and societally, so that we can rely on each other and science and not on excuses of, oh, God isn't helping us.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really important. I even see things, and I'd be curious your thoughts on, when people say, well, prayer doesn't work unless you do. And I'm like, so then prayer doesn't work if you just do the work. Then why do you need prayer? So, I mean...
Do you want an answer to this question?
Is it for this episode?
I don't think it fits into this episode.
Okay. But that's one thing I've, seen where, it's great to pray, but you need to do the work. It's like, well, then just do the work.
Absolutely. Well, even in the Bible, we are told, go and pray, and then get up and work.
So then, in my world, prayer just looks superfluous.
Sure. I'm okay with you currently holding that position.
Oh, currently?
Because I might have an explanation for you on another day
maybe our next
finds utility in prayer, whether or not it actually does the trick.
Interesting. Oh, now when are we going to do our episode on prayer? Another important note, and I think this is secular humanism in particular, rejects anything supernatural. So not just religion, but also pseudosciences, anything metaphysical. I have any type of woo-woo here. So I could easily identify as a secular humanist in addition to an atheist.
For sure.
I actually would separate those. I would say I'm an atheist and a secular humanist, personally. But like I said, some people pick one or the other. But I like that. It's definitely more all-encompassing.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
You have a note about theistic humanists.
Yes, there are theistic humanists. There's been plenty of philosophers, especially through the Enlightenment, who kind of made the idea popular again, I guess. And there was one fella, and we'll talk more about him later. His name is Thomas More. He was sainted by the Catholic Church. He was knighted in England.
Is he one of these saints you think shouldn't be a saint?
There is no reason in my mind that he should ever have been sainted. But here we are.
Here we are.
He was an English fella, and he was a Catholic in a time where it was not so great to be Catholic by the end of his life anyway. He made it his life's mission to prevent the publication of the Bible. He was a Catholic who was sainted. He prevented the publication of the Bible to the point of burning people's lives and livelihoods. But he was also a humanist.
I don't think he knows what any of these words mean.
His literature affirms a humanist philosophy. Of course, if you were on the opposite side of him in literally any battlefield, you were going to have a bad day.
Good.
Luckily, More modern humanists don't follow his example.
Of any humanist, theistic or otherwise.
Yeah. But he's my favorite to bring up as a famous theistic humanist.
Because he's garbage?
Because he's garbage. The best humanists are definitely secular and typically non-theistic or atheistic.
Thank you. Like, is that a compliment or like the best at being a humanist?
The best at being humanists.
Oh, okay. I just thought you meant like the best people are secular humanists, period. I was like, thank you.
And there's also, following that line of religious humanists, there are people who treat humanism as their religion. Like you had mentioned humanist chaplains, where it's, you have a ministry, this is your life kind of thing.
I mentioned Why I Left, Why I Stayed in our epistemology episode, which I think was 2 or 3 episodes ago now. And the son that left, he became a humanist chaplain because he liked the camaraderie and community that religion gives without having a God to believe in. Or
a theology to
attend to, or and just something that could be more open to more people. And I don't think he would have turned away anyone who was religious. It just wasn't focused on a deity or a theology, like you said, but more on community and volunteerism, and
there's a bunch of humanist groups, and there's even an international humanist and ethical union that kind of ties a lot of these groups together for larger meetings and conferences and whatnot. And they have an official statement on how humanism is defined that says, humanism is a democratic and ethical life stance which affirms that human beings have the right and responsibility to give meaning and shape to their own lives. It stands for the building of a more humane society through an ethic based on human and other natural values, in the spirit of reason and free inquiry through human capabilities. It is not theistic, and it does not accept supernatural views of reality.
I did it. I would say you're probably a theistic humanist. You don't quite fall into that definition because of your religious beliefs. But I think you're definitely on the let's make a humane world and build ethics that are encompassing to all people. I would call you a secular Christian humanist.
I'm pretty comfortable with that.
Nice. High five.
Yeah. Humanism is... It's a weird thing to see somebody speak out against. I haven't seen it yet, but I suspect that as I continue looking through the world, I might.
I don't know if anyone would speak out against it, but I definitely think there are people who aren't humanists.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
It's people who... Yeah, I don't think anyone would be like, I disagree with that, but there's people who think, well, God will provide, right? Mm-hmm. And that would be against... That would be not a humanist perspective, but right. I can't see anyone be like, you're a humanist, you must be evil. But yeah, there's definitely people who don't prescribe to it because of their faith or...
See, the reason I expect to hear somebody revile humanism is there's a handful of spots in the Bible where it says, don't trust in the arm of flesh, only trust in God. And so the people who prefer to quote that over the more helpful parts of the Bible are more likely to be anti-humanist.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're one of those people who also believe that this is the hell, this is the worst, and everything after will be better,
they'll probably be pretty opposed to this movement as well.
So,
in theory. Again, I haven't actually found anybody to revile humanism yet, but...
If you are, please send us an email. Any final thoughts on all this non-belief?
It ties in with our previous episode on epistemology several episodes ago now, I guess, that belief is kind of a complex thing. And if you want to hate somebody for not believing in a thing that you fail to provide evidence for, that's on you.
I would also add, and when you don't believe in, here's a grocery list of religions and deities. Yeah, for someone for not believing in yours, that's not very nice.
You have to acknowledge the validity of their position.
Right.
There's loads of atheists who kind of suck, but there's an awful lot more atheists that are perfectly fine people, as good as any Christian or Buddhist or Muslim or Jew.
I also don't think people, especially if you're on the other side and a believer, I also don't think, again, just thinking to like my social media world, people don't realize how many atheists are in their world.
Right? Because an awful lot of people just don't talk about religion, which makes it hard to tell.
And I think people often assume that, again, especially, I hate to say it, but the average Canadian white person, they're probably Christian. Right? So instead of going, well, maybe they don't believe, or maybe they believe in something entirely different, I think people just sort of project their beliefs on people that look like them specifically.
Absolutely.
And so when I've seen the odd anti-atheist comment on my Facebook feed, I'm like, do you not realize that there's a lot of us?
Right.
And we're like your friends and neighbors.
I have enough differences with people in my own religious community that I certainly can't go around out in public and imagine that everyone thinks the same as I do.
Cool. Well, I just want to reiterate that we don't believe in Satan and we don't hate God because there is no God or Satan. Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah.
Ooh, we have to ship things.
Ship?
Promote.
We definitely have to promote. Check out our Facebook, our Instagram. Feel free to email us. What's our email address, Katie? holywatermelonpod@gmail.com. And on our social media, you can find links to our Discord server where we try to have great conversations. And I think that's about it right now.
That's it. Yeah. Social media. Oh, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That'd be really great.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Peace be with you.
Salvation for
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecy had fulfilled itself.
God is near.